This week on CrossFeed,
Muslim creationism.
praying for low gas prices.
Is Jesus really God?
Is Jesus really the only way?
And Obama on the Bible.
Hey, and welcome everybody to this week's edition of CrossFeed News. I am Dr. Jim Butler. I serve as pastor of St. Luke's Lutheran Church in Dedham, Massachusetts.
And I'm Pastor Dale Critchley, pastor of St. Paul Lutheran Church in Delaware, Iowa. Welcome, everybody, to CrossFeed Religious News.
Hope you all are going, probably by the time you get this, I hope you all had a good 4th of July.
Yeah, so, we're recording this the night before.
And so even with, it's always a good time. And remember, especially, too, to thank our soldiers who continue to defend our freedoms. You call them soldiers, I call them children. So,
but we'll get to that later.
Yes, we will. So it's been a couple of weeks. Dale got busy last week, and it really wound up being good for me because the Vacation Bible School here was very exhausting.
Yeah, how'd it go?
Went very well. We actually made money.
You know, we usually do too. It's a weird thing. I mean, it helps when you do your own curriculum. But, you know, even when we don't, we generally come out in the black for Vacation Bible School. Like, really, we're not trying to, you know, we don't charge for it.
We don't either.
We put a note in when we send, a letter home telling parents about, you know, what's the closing service and stuff like that, and just some general information. We say, you know, it costs us like $5 a kid or something like that is what it works out to. So, you know, there's no charge. Nobody will be turned away if they can't pay or whatever. But, you know, if you can, great. And keep in mind the people that are unable to pay, and, you know, and it's, yeah, we always come out ahead.
Yeah, we just put a note saying, you know, we, you know, whatever. Well, you know, we have no idea. And some people gave 50, one person gave 100.
I think we get a check just about every year for 100 for one family.
That was really nice. And we got a lot of really neat notes. People, you know, can't really thank you. This is just really great. And we had just a wonderful director this year, and who's already signed on for next year.
Cool.
So God really blessed it. It was just really tremendous. Really
good
tremendous. Deal. So, well, you know, one of the problems, Dale, that, I don't know if you were reading today that they said, you know, high gas prices are going to be putting a damper on people traveling around and stuff. And a lot of us are really concerned about high gas prices. Well, one guy has brought a new way of dealing with this, and that is to pray that they would be lowered.
His name is Rocky Twyman, from Washington, D.C., and he came to San Francisco. Apparently gas prices aren't a big deal for him, or plane fuel prices, as the case may be, for a pray-in at a Chevron station. He's calling on churchgoers to ask for God's intervention where he says politicians have failed.
Yes. Well,
on the one hand, you know, I go, hey, I'm all for it. But, you know, then on the other hand, I go, I'm not sure if this is the way to do it, you know.
Oh, I can tell you it hasn't worked yet.
Yeah. Now, this is an interesting guy. He's a public relations consultant. And a community organizer. I'm not sure what that is. He's led campaigns to nominate Oprah Winfrey for the Nobel Peace Prize. So she's not exactly Christian, so I'm not sure what the deal is there. And to encourage African Americans to donate bone marrow, which, I mean, that's cool.
Yeah, that's cool.
I'm not sure about Oprah for a Nobel Peace Prize, though.
On the other hand, he also says if you're going to pray for cheaper fuel, you should also walk more, use carpools, or take the train.
Yeah, it gives a whole new meaning to do you walk the walk?
Yeah, that's true. Little literally there. I don't know. Do you walk the train? I don't know. Actually, out here, just announced last week that ridership on the subway system is up 10%.
I forgot to put the picture up. There we go.
So I wished. Unfortunately, it's not always easy for me to take the train everywhere up here because I have to go from point to point, so I don't always get to. But it's often a nice way to get around up here.
Well, train goes practically right past my house. In fact, people at different times have heard it on the show because it's that close, and especially when they blow the horn going through town. Problem is, it's a freight train, and I'm not a hobo.
You're going to be a train jumper, huh? So, no, it's hard to believe, but between Washington, D.C., New York, and Boston is half of all the train traffic in the country. Passenger rail traffic.
I believe it.
So, and it really is kind of nice, but, I don't know about praying that God would, lower the fuel prices. There's part of me, again, amen. This sounds like a real good thing, but I don't know.
Okay, I have actually a bigger question, and that is, and I've heard of different people going to a certain place to pray there.
Mm-hmm.
And my question is, why do you have to go there to pray that the gas price will go down there? Or let's go to the place where the prices are highest to pray that it goes down. That sounds almost like animism. That we got to go where God is, or, where the problem is, so that we can point it out to God, because he's not going to know otherwise. Or, it's sort of like when you have people that like go and pray over someone, or different things like, I've heard of different people doing things like that. This sort of location specific kind of prayer. And it reminds me of, like in the Old Testament, they would have to go to the tabernacle or the temple, to pray, because that's where God was. Okay. But, now God is with us. And, he's in our hearts through, by faith, through the Holy Spirit, through word and sacrament. And so, he is, you could go the angle of, I'm with you always to the very end of the age. Or you could also go with where two or three are gathered in my name, I am there. It doesn't say where gas prices are highest, I am there.
Then, of course, there's always the pastor when I was in high school at St. Paul's Lutheran Church, and I won't say where it was, but who would, in his prayers, say things like, Lord, we ask you please be with the Schmidt family at the death of Gerhardt this last week, whose funeral will be at Tuesday, 3 o'clock.
In case you were wondering.
We also said, did God need to put this in his date book, or, or something?
Just so thou knowest, O Lord.
Well, maybe that's why they're going to the gas pump. Just so thou knowest, O Lord, how high this really is. I'm going to point it out to you.
I mean, you kind of picture him standing there, pointing at the sign where it says, like $4 whatever a gallon, and he's going, Lord, do you see this? So, one important thing is that it's okay to pray about gas prices. Okay? There's nothing wrong with that. God wants us to pray about everything. Pray without ceasing. Any concerns that you have, take them to God. But, at the same time, he's traveling across the country from coast to coast to pray, as if God can't hear him in Washington, D.C.
And the gas prices are bad enough in Washington, D.C., let alone California. Exactly how does he want God to answer this? I mean, by opening up drilling? On the account
I think you should go to Alaska.
Does he want God to answer this prayer by strengthening the dollar so the price? Does he want God to? Because it's high in California because it's 63 cents a gallon tax. So maybe God can just remove that tax and that would drop the price of gasoline in California. So
I don't know. I get kind of irritated with people that say, well, that's okay. It encourages people to use more public transportation and walk and stuff like that. When I live 3 miles from the nearest small town and a good 5 to 7 from the nearest town with any kind of actual commerce per se. So, if I want to even go to like a Walmart or something like that, that's like 10 miles for me. And if I want to buy anything, really hard to ride my bike and carry, a week's worth of groceries on it. And they kind of frown on you taking the cart with you out of town.
Yeah, I know. And but I don't know why you can't just have a little 2-seater Prius. I mean, even though you have 3 kids, what difference does that make?
Well, not to mention the cost of a Prius.
That's true. But there are some things that I was reading one thing. It's like, do people realize that we need these smaller cars? I'm like, do you realize that people have children? Yeah, you put 2 kids in the back seat and you have no room, and then they get bored and they start kicking your back seat. I mean, there's a reason you have a minivan. You just shove them in the back and, tie them down so they don't bother you.
You shove them in back and you let them take out their iPods and Nintendo DSs and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, my day, we didn't have that kind of stuff yet. You tied them up and gagged them.
Strapped into the dinosaur's legs.
You got it. So, worked real well. Oh, goodness. Let's do this Muslim creationist guy next. I can't think of a good segue, but the rest of them, all the rest of the stories seem to be so tied together. I can see so many relationships. This one just seems to kind of be out. This is kind of an interesting story. This guy, Harun Yahya. I guess that's how you say his last name. He actually says it's Aaron John in Arabic is his name. It's a pseudonym he goes by. But he is a 52-year-old Turk, and he sends out. He's a publisher, and he has glossy books and DVDs on religion and science that sell in Islamic bookshops, and he also gives away lots of his volumes, and you can read much of his work on his websites for nothing too. But he sent out to all the scientists and teachers a 768-page book called The Atlas of Creation, which is a Muslim version of creation.
And now for something completely different.
Yeah, this guy's like the Muslim Ken Ham. So, Answers in Genesis, if anybody...
Okay, I was wondering who, I know Baked Ham, but Ken Ham didn't ring a bell.
So, yeah, he's Australian, although I think he spends more time in the United States now, but... he's the guy responsible for building the Creation Museum in Cincinnati. Yeah, It says it's well illustrated and free of theological jargon. They preach that Islam is the one true faith, and Darwinism, by undermining religious belief, has led to the discord, atheism, terrorism, and extreme political ideologies plaguing the world. So, reader-friendly, the books appeal to Muslims trying to square modern science with their faith in an inerrant Quran, much like Christian evangelicals who read the Bible literally and support creationism or intelligent design theories, which are two very different things. I just love how they lump those two together. I actually got a comment a little while back from somebody saying intelligent design isn't Christian, it's actually kind of pagan, but I did some reading on it and couldn't really find support for that statement.
I think it's pagan, but it's another version of theistic evolution for the most part.
Yeah.
But I just thought it was interesting. Well, even more interesting with this guy is, of course, that he's waiting for Jesus to come. And Jesus is returning, and he's going to, and sometime in the next 20 to 25 years, Jesus is going to return. But, of course, as a Muslim this time.
Oh, good grief.
Yeah. Well, all right. Now, keep in mind that Muslims hold Jesus in very high regard. And in fact, they consider him a greater prophet than Muhammad. But Muhammad is the final prophet, so he sort of has the final say on things. And they also believe that the Bible's been corrupted, that there are errors in the Bible, but the Quran is inerrant.
Yeah, there's it's a perfect copy of what it was in what is in heaven.
We know about the reality. Don't ruin the fantasy, okay?
Yeah. Which also is, by the way, the reason that any translation of the Quran from Arabic is not considered a translation. It's considered a paraphrase, no matter how close of a translation it is. Because, now, Jim and I learned Greek and Hebrew as part of our training, okay?
Dale actually remembers some of it.
Yeah, I still refer to the Greek and Hebrew when I'm writing my sermons. We look at that to get like nuances and stuff like that. But as long as the translation is a decent translation and true to the original intent, I consider it a translation. And yeah, no translation can perfectly capture the sense of the different words in the original language. There's certain things that you're just not going to get in, without going back to the original language, without like a footnote or something explaining it. But it's close enough that you can understand what it's saying. And, it's just real subtle kind of stuff. But it's a lot bigger deal when you're talking about the Quran, and when we say Muslims, we're talking here about what I'm not even sure what the term would be, but like Orthodox Muslims. Muslims are split into different groups, but there's Muslims who really hold strongly to this stuff, just like any other religion, and Muslims who are, sort of nominal Muslims. So we're talking about the ones that hold to. This is further complicated by the fact that they don't have any central authority. Except the Quran. But consequently, because of that, different imams take different approaches to things, which is where you run into some Muslims who are very violent and some who abhor violence. So,
I thought the interesting comment here was the what is it? Yeah, this book went out, and they wondered if it was by a bunch of financed by the Saudis, or if it was if U.S. creationists were behind it. Guys, I know you academics are very bright and very intelligent, but most U.S. creationists are Christian, not Muslim.
Yeah. Yeah, and pretty conservative Christians, not the sort of all roads lead to heaven Christians. We'll get to that in a minute.
I was going to say, is this the segue here? Yeah, so
That's how,
just
a
let you
little
guys
bit
know,
more.
okay? So, you realize, the Muslims have Muhammad in the Quran. Christians don't. So it's pretty, Christians are Bible and Jesus, okay? It's real kind of easy. It may be a little complex, but, so. Those of you who wondered, no. This is about the Quran. They're not behind it, no.
You take pride in being an insufferable know-it-all.
So, and there's also a rumor that this guy thinks that he's sort of the equivalent of, if I read this right, John the Baptist, paving the way for. Yeah, he says no, but it sounds like he hasn't completely ruled out the possibility.
Yeah, well, it's funny. He doesn't really say no. He goes, "I do not make such a claim." So it's doesn't tell anybody else. Well, his next book, by the way, is a book about skulls. He's going to show skull fossils as evidence that there was no evolution.
Yeah, this sounds like interesting stuff. And you can download his book for free. So I don't have a link, but I'm sure that you can Google it.
Yeah, I was kind of upset that they talked about you could get these books for free on the internet and stuff, and they didn't give us a link in the story. I would kind of like to have done that.
Of course, if it's in Arabic, I'm not sure if he has an English version.
Well, obviously he must if he sent this out to all these academics all across the,
oh, yeah.
So.
Well, it says it's distributed across the Muslim world in Islamic bookshops, but I guess it's in Europe too.
Yeah,
North
the
America.
Council of Europe accuses them of trying to infiltrate schools with a religious extremism, and French teachers are told to keep his work from their students. So
that I find interesting too. Keep his work from your students. A little bit book burning, kind of stuff there. Banned book list.
What can you tell? Anyway. Well, since you mentioned it and brought it up, let's go over to the Pew Forum study. We actually got an email from, who was it? Said we really should cover the story.
Jeff. No. It was a while ago. I had actually already posted it. And then, was it short? No. I don't remember who it was. I'd have to go back and look. I still have the email. But, that's a reminder though, that if anybody sees a story that you want us to cover, you can post it. Go to CrossFeedNews.com, log in or register if you haven't created an account there, and just click on new web link or something like that, and post it yourself. So it's very easy to do. But I went and found it because they were specifically talking about the Katie Couric interview, and so I found it on YouTube, and it's on the comments there. I posted the YouTube video up there, which I can throw if I get a chance, I'll throw the YouTube video in the and at the end of the show.
Oh, switch off.
That sounds good. But it was quite a study. It had, what was it? 36,000 people that they interviewed and stuff, and talked about their religious faith and how they view things and stuff. And basically, kind of came up that American Christianity is pretty messed up.
Yeah. 70% of those claiming religious affiliations believe multiple religions can lead a person to salvation, while 68% say there is more than one way to interpret the teachings of their religion.
Right. Even more interesting was that 57% of Christians who say they are evangelicals, and by the way, our church body, the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, was part of this evangelical group. Was started there. Say that multiple religions can lead to salvation.
So, now, I'm wondering if, I like to think the part of this, when people hear religions, all right, do you mean denominations? Or do you mean actual different, like, are you talking Baptist, Methodist, Lutheran? Or are you talking Christian, Muslim, Jew, Hindu, Now, I'm sure that they intended, different actual religions, not just denominations within a religion. But, they're, it's hard to say how people are going to interpret the questions.
Right. Well, I think it's even, a lot of this is kind of interesting. 21% of atheists said they believe in God.
Yeah. Guys, then you're not an atheist.
Right. It's, but, I think this one guy makes a very good, a thing. Religion in the United States has increasingly become a matter of personal choice as opposed to the community they grew up in, said Todd Johnson, director of Center for Study of Global Christianity in South Hamilton, Massachusetts, probably right next to Gordon Conwell Seminary. Categories are not as strong as they have been in the past, which has been happening for some time. That people are not sticking around in, it used to be you were born Lutheran, you stayed Lutheran, that except for some Roman Catholicism, a lot of, in Eastern Orthodoxy, a lot of those old denominational loyalties, they've been gone for years.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, but, here's the thing, though, is what do you believe? What do you believe at all? Because, here's the thing. Now, assuming that when they said different religions can lead to a person to salvation, all right, we've got one religion that says, you've got Jesus saying, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father but by me. All right. Then you've got another religion that says that, and Christianity also says that you're saved completely by grace because of what Jesus has done for you, and you're saved through faith in Him. And then you've got every other religion that says that you're saved based on your works in some way, shape, or form. See, my understanding of this, where this really comes in, because I remember when I was in high school, I was a little confused about this. And I thought, well, as long as you're sincere, and then I realized, wait a minute, sincerity, that's law, that's my good works, then that's putting the onus on me instead of on God. And how am I saved? And the way I always present this to the kids in my confirmation class is, all right, and we talk about this when we talk about faith, and is faith a gift of God, or is it something that we do? And I say, all right, how are you saved? Because of something you've done, or because of something God does? And, they understand that it's because of something God has done. And so I say, okay, then is faith something we do, or is it something God does? And a lot of times they go, well, it's something we do. Okay, then we're saved by works or faith? Faith. Okay. Are you saved because of something that God does or something that we do? And we just keep kind of going around that circle until the lights start going on. And they go, oh, oh, faith is something God does, but as soon as you put the human being into the equation and give us even the smallest bit of credit, then you've strayed away from Christianity.
Well, just remember, you said, you thought, doesn't matter what you believe, so long as you're sincere. The Great Pumpkin comes the most sincere pumpkin patch there ever is. And Linus said his pumpkin patch was sincerity just as far as the eye could see. So, we see where sincerity gets us. We can be very sincere. You can also be sincerely wrong. That's the problem. I think one guy, Michael Lindsay, sociologist at Rice University, I think he's really got it. Religion in America is 3,000 miles wide, but it's only 3 inches deep. And if I don't want to sound like I'm bashing, but if you listen to a lot of popular evangelical preachers, Joel Osteen, Bill Hybels at Willow Creek Community, and some of these other guys, it's just that they preach very well. I mean, they're entertaining to listen to. Joel Osteen, I think, is one of the, probably one of the best speakers there is to spend time listening. Tells great stories, but he has no theology. He has nothing.
Yeah, I mean, if you close your eyes, you can't tell if it's if it's a pastor or actually, even if you don't close your eyes, because most of them are in these big auditoriums that don't really resemble churches in any way, shape, or form. Often not even a cross to be seen. But it's like, okay, is that a pastor or Dr. Phil? He's got hair. It's a pastor.
Tony Robbins. But still, it is. It's self-help, encouragement. It's, how-to sermons, what you should do. Which I'm not saying, which I don't think necessarily all bad. But, with no gospel. And the people aren't being treated. I mean, after all, we even talked a couple of weeks ago about, how Willow Creek is undergoing a transformation and saying, we need to be teaching the people the faith. They need something deeper than what we've been offering.
Right. Yeah, catechesis. It's my battle cry. We got to teach people the basics of the Christian faith. If they don't even know salvation through faith, salvation by grace alone, man, we have completely lost the fight. I mean, what are we doing if we're not hitting on the basics? We spend all our time on the 10 Commandments. If that. And we kind of dance around those and don't want to discuss anything that's going to offend anybody. Like, let's see, can't touch abortion, because that's political. Can't touch divorce because, man, half the people in the congregation are divorced and they'll be offended if we talk about it. There's all these things that pastors are afraid to talk about. So you just kind of dance around this whole self-help thing. And
I don't want to teach the kids the 10 Commandments. I'm afraid of giving them ideas.
Yeah.
Don't do this. Don't do this. That sounds fun. Anyway, So,
or for that matter, wait. If I tell them this is wrong, they'll go, "Hey, wait a minute. Are you listening to yourself?" I found myself doing that. I'm like working on the sort of law portion of my sermon, and I'll have an example, and I'll go, "Oh, whoa, that hits a little too close to home. Maybe I should change that." No, that really wouldn't be honest, but I hope my wife isn't listening too closely, because otherwise she'll be pointing at me when I say it,
And a few times my wife has got, "So, you talked about yourself, huh?" Yeah. Anyway, but I think the other thing's interesting is they say that, there is a, and they don't use this metaphor in the story, but I have, there is in American religion a cafeteria mentality. That I can take some of this, I can take some of this, I can take some of this, and bring it all together into my own thing. I was reading an article in Reader's Digest this morning, interview with Pierce Brosnan, guy best known playing Remington Steele and then had played James Bond for a number of years. And of course he's Irish, and talked about his Catholic upbringing and that he, rarely misses Mass. He goes to stuff, just. But he's also quite intrigued by Buddhist philosophy and Buddhist practices. So here's this guy, I don't know if he ever dawned on him that Christianity and Buddhism are, contradictory in a lot of ways. But he's kind of, melding them together. The fancy word for that, of course, is syncretism, where you take these different approaches and bring them together. But Americans have always been quite syncretistic.
Yep. Just think like synchronizing.
So it's, by the way, I thought it was fun. Residents of northeastern states like Maine, Vermont, and Massachusetts are even less religious than Californians. Yeah. I live here, folks. I could have told you that.
Right there.
Yeah, very, 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 very secular up here. And a lot of de-churched Catholics who just...
you think that's because of the quality of the pastors they have in Massachusetts?
No, it's just the nature of the area. I mean, very, very educated, very, very liberal. It's just life up here. It just really is, and a lot of people been really really burned. I had there was a family sent their kid to our vacation Bible school last week, and their kids hadn't been baptized, and I happened to be talking to the mom, and she said, yeah, she and her husband had both had very bad experiences in the Catholic Church, and they're just not sure where to go from here. But they want their kids to be exposed to something. So their kids come to our Sunday school and do our VBSs and stuff because she's friends with some of her members. So I'm trying to follow up on that. So.
Yeah. So, if you, was it said, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything?
Yep. And actually, that's exactly what they say at one point. It says it's not that Americans don't believe in anything. It's that the issue is not that the Americans don't believe in anything. It's that they believe in practically everything.
Yeah. No matter how much it contradicts itself.
So, but that, of course, also is part of a postmodern mindset, that you can hold two contradictory thoughts in your mind at the same time and move right along with them and be perfectly fine.
Right.
So, speaking of people who do that, we have the what was his name? John Killinger at the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship General Assembly in Memphis.
I got a bad feeling about this.
And he is executive minister and theologian in residence at Marble Collegiate Church in New York City. And he's got a book out called The Changing Shape of Our Salvation. And he argues that religion has moved from a belief in doctrine to a quest for self-fulfillment, drawing on useful tidbits from an eclectic variety of faith traditions. Boy, isn't that...
Gee, that sounds familiar.
Yeah, it does.
We don't even need a segue here. It's just like one story goes into the other one.
Right.
Just automatically.
Doctrine is not the driving force to many people today, except to the fundamentalists who insist on it. That's Dale and I, Killinger said. But doctrine is a thing of the past now religiously.
To him, and to many Americans, that's absolutely true. And, frankly, to many Europeans, too. And not so much in Africa. There's plenty of syncretism in Africa, but it's completely different. Yeah, in Africa, you've got these animistic religions where Christians have come in, but people have just had a hard time letting go of their animistic beliefs. And it's different. It's not like I'm going to pick and choose. It's like, this is my worldview, and you're bringing this other thing in, which, okay, I can accept that, but you're asking me to give up a lot here. I mean, there's definitely a comparison there, but it's kind of different.
Now, what I found interesting is his basis for saying all this is higher critical views of the Bible form criticism. These ideas where you take the Bible and try and deconstruct it. You know, Jesus has had a lot of things said on his behalf that he never intended.
We're in trouble.
This is one of the things that's going on in biblical studies. I think is much more promising than some of the fundamentalists will allow, is that we're questioning whether Jesus himself said this or whether an institutional church that grew up in Jesus' wake said this.
Right. Well, you remember, who was the theologian that said, did God really say, what was his name?
You mean besides Rudolf Bultmann?
Satan! That's it! No, I've heard that somewhere before. It's Genesis 3. Yeah. It's in the Bible. Did God really say?
But this is the same stuff that, people like Rudolf Bultmann were saying, with their demythologizing of Scripture and this need to peel back the layers to get to the historical Jesus from underneath, everything. And, that it really didn't matter if Jesus said it or not, or did it or not, because it was all really in the existential experiencing of Jesus.
Right. The Bible's like an ogre. It has layers.
That's right. Parfait. Everybody likes parfait. And in the morning, I'm going to make waffles.
I'm sorry.
I still think Shrek is one of the best movies ever made. I can watch that movie again and again. And so
the first one.
Yes, the first one.
Not the second one was all right, and the third one was really disappointing.
Yep, but that first one was that was good. And the Shrek ride at Universal Studios is really good too. So,
okay, we gotta get ourselves out of this rat hole. He said he benefits from the mystical experience of reading John's Gospel privately, but cannot advocate John's high view of Christ in serious preaching or scholarship. The mystical experience of reading it? Mm-hmm. He's talking about the Holy Spirit?
Well, no, he's talking about an existential experience. Here it is. It's a private thing, many CBF pastors agree with his views of salvation. When he asked them what salvation meant to them, they all talked about self-fulfillment and love rather than doctrine.
By the way, for anybody that doesn't know, doctrine means teachings. It's just a fancy word that means teachings.
Right. So, which is interesting because then he has to have a teaching.
Right. He's teaching something. He's teaching his view of Jesus.
Right.
Well, his view is you can't really know. He's like, this is what's that Monty Python skit where with the missile? Have you seen that one?
No.
This atheist or agnostic is sitting at the breakfast table on Sunday morning. The bells are ringing, and he's irritated that the church bells are ringing, and he shouldn't have to listen to it because he's not a Christian and stuff. And so his wife says, "Oh, well, you could use that missile that I got you. It's up in the attic, and you just set it for church, and it automatically homes in on the nearest church, and the church is like coming up his walkway toward his house. It's really, infringing on him. And so the final line goes something like, after he blows up the church, is like, well, it just goes to show that there's nothing a man can't do when he's really not sure whether he believes in anything or not.
No, I haven't seen that one, but
look it up on YouTube.
Okay.
I'm not going to find that one and stick it at the end, but
the other thing, again, here we're going back to old-fashioned higher criticism. The book of Daniel fibbed a lot. Even though Daniel claims to be written earlier, it was actually written in the 2nd century BC, he said, and pretends to prophesy about events that occurred previously.
Yeah.
That's
and
just...
the basis for that statement is, well, he couldn't have known all those details, so it must have been written later.
Right.
Oh, and he uses some Aramaic. As if Aramaic just sort of sprung out of nowhere in the 2nd century BC.
I mean, in reality, if he had written later, after Alexander the Great, which is what he claims, Daniel probably would have written in Greek, because that was kind of the language after Alexander the Great of all the learned people. They want to say he wrote in the day, and I got news for you. If he wrote in Palestine under the days of Antiochus Epiphanes IV, and they found him writing in Aramaic, that would not have been an apropos time, and Hellenism was really strong, and these people were becoming more and more Greek all around them, and so
there was Hebrew and Aramaic in the what do you call those guys? The Dead Sea Scrolls.
Qumran community.
Yeah, those guys. Yeah. The Essenes.
But the fact, the Essenes and the Qumran community. But the fact is, I mean, most people, it was Greek and Hellenism taken over. I mean, that was why the Septuagint was created, was because people didn't speak Hebrew anymore. They'd taken over by Greek. So, but the argument I would have is that Daniel's as late as they want to say it is. Why wasn't it written in Greek? Why doesn't he show the influence of Hellenism in his life, which certainly would have been there. But anyway,
not only that, if it was written that late, the people would have known, and it wouldn't have been accepted as canon in the Old Testament or the Hebrew Bible or whatever you want to call it.
I also like the way he shows that there are different theologies in the Bible, and he pits Matthew, Mark, and Luke against John's Gospel.
After you say, well, he didn't really say this, and this,
Right.
You pick it apart, and you've got like chicken bones against each other. There's no meat on them at all.
But there's the tendency of Mark and Matthew and Luke to see the more human side of Jesus, who was anointed at the time of his baptism to be the Savior of Israel, but not necessarily be the pre-existent one we find in John.
Yeah. How does Mark start out? The gospel of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. We got Luke, has the virgin birth. And Matthew's whole thing is that he's demonstrating how Jesus is, you have Matthew's the one that has the Magi that come and worship him.
Which probably none, of course, according to this guy, happened. That was all stuff that was added by the church in Jesus' wake.
So you look at this circular reasoning. All right. Well, this stuff was all added. But after it was all added, then they contradict each other. Like, okay, well, what if we take out all the stuff that was supposedly added? Does it still contradict each other? Like, how much are you going to pick it apart? What parts are you going to, so, it's like, well, we're going to alter the original text to support our views. I mean, it's not just like, it's not like that postmodern thing where you pick and choose what you like and what you don't like. They actually just like strike it out and say, no, never said that, It's sort of doing Thomas Jefferson, you just tear out the pages that talk about the resurrection,
So, okay, well, I guess he can do his thing in New York City. And then, of course, there is, oh man, our buddy Jimmy Dobson and Barack Obama. And there is no love here, folks.
I took this,
it's a good thing we're not in Harry Potter days, because if we were those two pictures, they would both be walking out of the frame right now or turning out hitting each other.
Well, this is actually a Photoshop thing It was actually Obama and Jeremiah Wright. So I just pasted Dobson in there. So, but yeah, it looks kind of like they're buddies.
Yeah, so anyway, I'm really kind of irritated with CNN because they highlight this evangelist accuses. And Dobson, although I may not be one of his greatest fans in the world, he's not an evangelist. He's, doesn't claim to be. So, but he is an evangelical leader. But he accused of Barack Obama of distorting the Bible and having a fruitcake interpretation of the Constitution. Now this is interesting. That he criticized him on a speech that he did 2 years ago, in June 2006, to the liberal Christian group Call to Renewal. And in that speech, Obama said it would be impractical to govern based solely on the word of the Bible, noting that some passages suggest slavery is permissible and eating shellfish is disgraceful. Which passages of Scripture should guide our public policy? Obama asked. Should we go with Leviticus, which suggests slavery is okay and eating shellfish is an abomination? Should we go with Deuteronomy, which suggests stoning your child if he strays from the faith? It may not be a bad idea. Or should we just stick to the Sermon on the Mount? Which he says is a passage is so radical it's doubtful that our Defense Department could survive its application.
It's kind of mixing that whole two kingdoms thing.
Yeah. That's what we would say.
Yeah. He's taking these passages that apply to, first of all, he's taking passages that only apply to the Old Testament nation of Israel. And that apply to us sort of in the sense of be different from the world around you is sort of the point of those passages about shellfish and things like that. Not, by the way, some people go, well, it was because it was for health reasons. No, it wasn't. All right. There were plenty of other things they poured blood on people. This wasn't about health reasons, okay? It was to say you're different from those other people. You're not going to act like them. You're going to act differently to show that you're not just another, pagan cult. And, but he's kind of picking shit. I hear this same argument all the time for, like, when you're talking about, gay marriage, for instance. Well, the Bible says that it's wrong. Oh, well, the Bible also says that you should have 4 tassels on the 4 corners of your clothing, too. Like, yeah, but you're taking it out of context. We're not just picking and choosing, proof texting, right? You got to look at stuff in their context and see what it actually means. Right.
You look at the stuff on homosexuality in the Old Testament. It's also in the context of incest, child sex, a whole host of evils that are there. Right. And there's nowhere, and no way can you actually argue from Leviticus that God is equating sexual sin with, eating cheeseburgers.
Right. So, and for that matter, the Sermon on the Mount is not so much, it really irritates me when people take the Sermon on the Mount as law. It's not. It's gospel. The point of it is, when you're down and out and feeling lousy and you feel like the whole world's against you, take heart. Because God is going to take care of you. God is with you, and God has great plans for you. All right? So, Well,
I would argue that I think there is a law part of it then, though, where Jesus is saying, unless your righteousness is better than that of the Pharisees and teachers of the law, you won't get into heaven. And then he goes to that whole application of showing how the law goes beyond simply the written word to the heart. But
right.
Obama is absolutely correct. Yeah, again, it is a mixture of the two kingdoms here. I understand that. But yes, it is so radical that, no one could come up to it, let alone be applicable as a system of government, really. But that's not the purpose of the Sermon on the Mount, to be a governing philosophy. Government, by its very nature, is law-based.
Right.
Not gospel-based. And it's not, created to be something that tells us how to do it. I remember back not too long after 9/11 and up in the People's Republic of Amherst, Massachusetts, there was a... I'm kidding you, man. This place, it's only legal to fly the flag on, like 3 days a year. But anyway, there was a guy had a sign outside. It said, "Jesus said, forgive your enemies. Don't bomb the Taliban." I'm like, Jesus is not speaking to a government. Jesus is speaking on an individual level. So.
Yeah. So, I mean, Obama is right in that we can't use the Bible as a government guideline. That's not how it was intended. At the same time, we should fully expect that any Christian politicians, legislators who are making decisions are going to make decisions based on their own personal worldview and their own moral code. And so, therefore, we've got this weird sense in our society that you can only make decisions based on an atheist worldview. And atheism isn't a religion, except it's a set of teachings that dictate what the universe is, how it was designed and set up, and
Well, maybe not necessarily an atheist worldview, but definitely a secular worldview. That, when I enter into making a decision as a politician, that however my religion might view that, whether Christian or Muslim or Jewish or anything else, that's not supposed to affect how I would look at the laws and things. Which it doesn't make any sense, because then we're asking that people be divided within themselves. And right. Well, what you believe about God, what you believe about the way the world is, it all is going to fit together. I mean, I'm a person who believes very strongly in environmentalism. I mean, you come outside my house on recycling day, we probably recycle more than anybody else on our street. I mean, every scrap of paper I put in that sucker. Why? Because I believe this is God's world. My theology of creation affects my theology of taking care and being a good steward of the world that God has made. If I believed that it just happened to show up by chance, who cares, man? There may be another one. Doesn't bother me.
Yeah, hey, it's just recycle the world at that point. The world destroys itself; it'll rebuild itself. It's happened billions of times before.
It's happened. My care for people is based on the fact that I believe that each person was created in the image of God.
And paid for with the blood of Christ.
What?
And paid for with the blood of Christ.
Right, and paid for the blood of Christ. That these are really God's people, and whether they realize that or not. And yes, okay, if they reject Christ, they may be, a little warm after they die. I confess that. But that doesn't stop me from caring them and loving them right now as people made in the image of God and for whom Christ has given his blood. My theology affects how I live my life. And I think that should be true for, if I was a politician, it would be very true. That would affect how I would look at things.
Right.
Granted, politics is the art of compromise, and sometimes you end up compromising things a little bit. But to say, that we have to, you could only, do government or make decisions from a secular viewpoint just doesn't make any sense. But
now see, what really got Dobson upset though here, more than anything else, the thing that he kind of latched onto was a comment where, Obama says, even if we did have only Christians in our midst, which I don't know where he's coming from with that, because no one's ever called for that. If we expelled every non-Christian from the United States of America, whose Christianity would we teach in the schools? Would we go with James Dobson's or Al Sharpton's? And so they're saying, well, Sharpton's a black racist, so Obama is somehow saying that equating Dobson with racial bigotry, and I don't see that at all.
Actually, I think he's just doing just the opposite. I think he's, showing there's two very different views here under what would be considered Christian.
Right. Yeah, the whole thing is he's saying these guys are opposites of each other. So I thought that was kind of strange. If anything, I would like to be contrast with Al Sharpton. If anybody would like to talk about me and Al Sharpton, please do so in a contrasting manner.
Instead of equating the two, he's contrasting the two.
Right.
Well, the other thing that really got him upset was his other comment here. Democracy demands that the religiously motivated translate their concerns into universal rather than religion-specific values. It requires their proposals to be subject to argument and amenable to reason. And Dobson said he's taken to the lowest common denominator of morality. Am I required in democracy to conform my efforts in the political arena to his bloody notion of what is right with regard to the lives of tiny babies? What he's saying here is, unless everybody agrees, we have no right to fight for what we believe. What the senator is saying there, in essence, is that I can't seek to pass legislation, for example, that bans partial birth abortion because there are people in the culture who don't see that as a moral issue. And if I can't get everyone to agree with me, then that's undemocratic to pass legislation that I find offensive to Scripture. Now that is a fruitcake interpretation of the Constitution. Says Dobson. I didn't get that out of that statement.
Yeah, I didn't either. I don't... See, I think they're both wrong here. Now, certainly, there's no question that Obama has some really screwy and anti-biblical beliefs. I mean, Barack Obama has voted repeatedly in favor of live birth abortion. In other words, the baby's already born. You, stick them on a shelf in a broom closet till they die. He's in favor of that.
Exposure. Just in case it gets somebody, coming back to his deal, make sure you have, exactly where he said that. Handy.
It's in his voting record. He voted in favor, because there was a problem with this going on. The United States legislature voted pretty much unanimously against it. If you look at the Illinois legislature, the United States legislature voted to ban it, which I don't even understand why it should have to be in the first place, but because it was happening, they said, hey, we got to make sure this isn't happening. They tried to ban it also in the Illinois legislature. Obama headed the cause and voted against the ban. Even NARAL, National Abortion RAL, Rights
Action
something.
League.
Yeah, that. They were neutral on it. Obama was against the ban. So that's in his voting record.
Well, go ahead. Back to your comment.
But the point is that, if he can take stuff like this and square it with what he considers his Christian beliefs, he's definitely there. I mean, you look at the early Christian church. The early Christian church, everybody thought it was weird because this kind of what they're calling live birth abortion, it was going on in the Roman Empire. The pagans they'd have a baby, and babies are liabilities, and we've already got one, and it's a boy, and or whatever, and we don't need any more, so you just leave them on the roadside to die. Christians would come along, scoop them up, take them home, adopt them, and raise them, and and people are like, what's wrong with you? And they're going, these are children of God. We're going to care for them, and you can't just do that to a human being. And so, this is a Christian practice to look out for babies.
Right. At the same time, I going back to his statement here, I mean, I don't see it coming back where Dobson is at all. Because I've often argued very much the same thing. Number one, that okay, even if I have a religious motivation here, and let's go ahead and use the abortion issue. Okay, to me, I can't, simply argue God says it's wrong. Or the Lutheran Confession says it's wrong. Or the Bible says it's wrong.
Sure.
I need to come up with, secular arguments, or as he puts it, universal values instead of religion-specific values. But here's the question: what are we saying, really? Well, that this child doesn't count. And other people, in this case the mother's, needs take priority. Well, and it's a utilitarian argument ultimately.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the question is then you're asking, when is this really a person? When is there a personhood given? And if you say, because the personhood is given until point B, Peter Singer saying personhood should be granted to the child a year old now. And then there should be
self-awareness.
Self-awareness, which is exactly what the exposure argument allows for. But the question is then, on the other end of life, if someone has Alzheimer's and has no more self-awareness, then why not get rid of them? I mean, from a secular viewpoint, you can make a very good secular argument here on just
and Peter Singer argued that until his mom got sick, and then all of a sudden it didn't apply to her.
Right. I mean, but he says it requires the proposals to be subject to argument and amenable to reason. And I would argue, yes. I mean, Bernard Nathanson, was a atheist, anti-abortionist. Pro-life atheist. Why? He could argue cogently, from his work as an obstetrician. And actually, as a person who formerly was very heavily involved in the abortion movement, in performing abortions, that, no, this is a wrong thing to do. Later on, I actually wound up becoming Roman Catholic. I was just reading an interesting article today, the link to it from National Review. I was a pro-choice atheist and have become a pro-life Catholic. And one of the questions this woman talked about was, at what point do we become people? And that was an issue that really drove her in her quest of change. So,
yep. And the thing is, babies fight for life in the womb. They, in fact, twins and multiples, they fight with each other in the womb.
And they fight with each other out of the womb too.
Yeah, well, it doesn't change, but ultrasound technology has shown that I've got a blog post way back at CrossFeedNews.com about this, that babies fight with each other in the womb. If the story of Esau and Jacob, that's supported scientifically now, that they actually kick each other, and you can tell that it's not just like reflex or, oh, you got in the way or something like that. There's dominance and submissiveness and, all kinds of that kind of stuff going on. Babies already show personalities in the womb. So, and that's just when we can actually see those personalities come through. Since we know that personalities are genetic, they have those personalities from the moment that they're a single a zygote.
Yeah.
So
this article I referred to is interesting, talking about the idea of pro-life. So one night I was discussing the topic with my husband, who was also re-examining his own pro-choice stance. He made a passing remark that startled me into reconsidering this issue. It just occurred to me that being pro-life is being pro-other people's life, he said. Everyone is pro their own life.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, if fetuses had the right to vote, then, there would never be a question.
It's true. But on the other side, as a theologian, Obama is not. He says he really does struggle with the idea that Jesus is the only way. Obama thinks all people of faith, Christians, Jews, Muslims, animists, everyone know the same God. So he's a little bit of a universalist. But you know what? And again, we are commenting, let's get this very clear, on his theology and where we're going to disagree with his, political practice. We realize that as a candidate, he's not running to be chief pastor. He's not running to be
because President Bush has said the same things. President Bush is seen as this prominent Christian guy, all right? He has made statements about, Christian, Jews, Muslims all worshiping the same God. So, I always wonder with those things, all right, how much do you actually believe that? And, are you part of that, 70% or whatever that actually does believe that? Or are you just saying it because you don't want to offend all of the Muslims and Jews and, and everybody else because of that whole scandal of particularity, which is that only those who believe in Christ are saved and everybody goes to hell?
Well, I'm going to probably really get it from LCMS guys, because it's not that I would necessarily say, I would argue they probably do worship the same God, except for the fact that the Muslims and the Jews don't understand the fullness and understand the fullness of the Trinity and understand the whole thing because they don't know Jesus. So and I do this basically based on on doing evangelism with Muslims and Jews, is because we talk about, well, how do you plan to get to heaven? How do you honor God? How do you worship Him? What do you do? Well, I do my best. Well, how do you know you ever do good enough with God then? Let me tell you what God has done for you. But I never start off and say, by the way, the God you worship is a false one. We worship two completely different gods here.
Sure, it's the Mars Hill approach.
Right, but if you read the Lutheran dogmatician Pieper, he even talks about there's two different ways to God here. And there's, two different religions and two different roads to God, basically. But the moment you say that, you argue ultimately there's just one God. Just some people understand really what the way to Him really is, and others don't.
Yeah, and understand what His true nature is. So,
I would say
I could describe my wife and describe her completely different than she really is. And while I may still be talking about her, my description of her is absolutely 100% inaccurate.
So that gets to be a bit of an issue. But if you're going out and doing, if you actually witness to people of other, monotheistic religions, then you really do get this argument. Then, well, I'm really talking about the gospel, because really you don't understand the gospel or who Jesus is. And it's one thing, I think, to argue that they worship the same God in a very wide sense of that word, worship. It's another thing to say that everybody's going to heaven.
Right.
Because I would hold that only those who know Jesus go to heaven. So now you can all attack me. Have a good time.
It's all about context. I mean, it's all about, okay, what do you mean when you say that, So it's easy to kind of jump on those statements and say, well, this person said this. Like, okay, what was the context, and did he explain himself, and what did he really mean by that, So I think you've explained yourself well enough that you haven't contradicted the teachings of the Bible or the Lutheran confessions. So
thank you. I try not to.
And hey, you quoted Pieper, so so then you're all right.
Hey, updates time. A couple weeks ago, we had a article about the Apple of His Eye Mission Society. a Lutheran Church Missouri Synod group that wanted to hand out tracts at a gay pride event in June, and they were told they couldn't do that. Get out of here. And I guess that really took place. Yeah, it was. They were threatened with arrest during a similar gay pride event in 2006. So they filed this lawsuit because they wanted to hand it out June 28th and 29th at this event. And a federal judge issued a preliminary injunction against the city of St. Louis on June 24th, 4 days before this, saying that yes, you absolutely can go out there and hand out your tracts. He said it was granting this preliminary injunction. He said, while there may be attendees at Pride Fest 2008 who may also object to plaintiffs' distribution of religious literature or expression of religious views, their injury, namely the suffering of viewpoints with which they may disagree, is outweighed by the restriction of plaintiffs' First Amendment right to express those views in a public forum.
Let's hear it for the U.S. Constitution.
Yes, let's hear it for the U.S. Constitution. Again, I mean, if which I know they don't, but if they were to be walking around with signs saying God abhors you, God hates fags, I would have a real problem with that. But to be handing out tracts and just talking and to do the kind of low-key thing I think they're going to be doing, that's completely different. So I just pray. Well, I'd like to know how that actually went for them and what that was like to be out there. So, hey, we got mail this time. A couple of them. Ooh. So.
Right. First of all, we got a video from George, and I'll stick that one at the end too. It's another YouTube video, and it happens to be a YouTube video of one of my favorite songs, by my absolute favorite band, Lost and Found, and it's called the Lutheran Song. Now, you do have to note in this, and by the way, there's a couple videos of this song out there. This one, I would probably call the right one, because it mentions, one of the guys that it mentions who's a Lutheran is Paul Simon. It's Paul Simon the politician, not Paul Simon as in Simon and Garfunkel. So, and this one gets it right. There's another one out there that shows Paul Simon the singer. So, and
the word Lutheran is used very loosely because Steve Jobs is considered Lutheran, Lonnie Anderson is considered Lutheran. Okay, these people were born Lutheran, maybe baptized, yes, confirmed Lutheran, but not
Steve Jobs was confirmed Lutheran, but he's a Buddhist now.
Right.
Steve Jobs was LCMS.
So,
but yeah, now he's a Buddhist.
Yeah, it's a very wide. The Lutherans are not like Adam Sandler's Jews. You're always Jewish because it's always racial. No, it's not quite the same thing, but it's a fun song after all. And the other was a note entitled "Hi Podcast People," and Dale, do you have that one?
Yep, I do.
Okay, you'll have to. I'll let you read it.
Okay, it says Dale and Dad. So we're starting to get the idea of who this is from. Hey, thanks for the shout out. To answer, so this is from Jim's daughter Kelly. To answer the audio or video question, I'm getting the new one starting with 88 in video and the older ones in audio only. I'm listening to the audio in backwards order. I wonder if she gets satanic messages when she listens to it backwards. Sorry. Not what she meant. Okay. I'm back to 79. I only have back through 51 because episodes 1 through 50 were 404. And I fixed that. I didn't realize they never copied from the old server. It's all fixed, and now you can get 1 through 50. Although, as you go back further, the audio really degrades. Because over time we got better microphones, and I was still on dial-up when we started this. We started doing video when I finally got broadband. So, yeah, the audio, because we had such low bandwidth at the beginning and cheap microphones and stuff, or no microphones, we were just using our computer microphones, the audio in the first episodes was really bad. But, okay, She goes on, Dale, you'll have to excuse my dad for gloating about 100-plus kid VBS. It must be nice after all the years of his own kids being the only ones in it.
Now, that was not true. It is true that my kids are the only ones in Sunday school.
Okay.
But yeah, she. Yeah. So, but yeah, she knows what she's talking about for the most part there.
Okay. It's still good stuff. How did I not know that Dad was doing this? I'll try to listen and comment till I leave and catch back up in September. How did she not know that you were doing a podcast?
I've talked about it. She's my daughter. You think she listens to me?
It's a good thing this is like coming up on Independence Day and not Father's Day. Kids don't even know that her dad podcasts. My kids know that because I always try and get them into bed before I start. Oh, Dad's podcasting tonight. Got to go to bed early. So, let's see. I told my dad someone should transcript the podcast. He said since I thought so, I could do it. Good plan. If AIT, what does that stand for?
Advanced Individual Training.
Okay. Is as boring as I hear it's going to be, I will. Hey, Kelly, that would be awesome. There's just no good, like, software to automatically do it. Now, there is, the stuff actually technically is being sort of transcripted. If you go to our site, there's like, it's like Podzinger or something like that. There's a little search box where you can search the transcripts. Unfortunately, it's software indexing it. And so it's not very accurate, and you can't, like, just read a transcript. You can search for, like, some keywords, and what it'll do is it'll find the spot. Like, you can you can search for a keyword, and then you can go to listen, and it'll play it from right around that spot so you can hear what's said. But it's not really a true transcript per se, it's just indexed. So you can't actually read it. So yeah, if you or anybody else would like to, would be willing to transcript these things, that would be great because then people could find us a lot better because search engines are still not indexing audio. They index Flash now, or Google's starting to, but they still don't index audio. Which is kind of sad.
Yeah. And of course my daughter's getting ready to take off, for, her basic training. She leaves on Tuesday and heads down to Fort Jackson. That's why she said she'll have to catch up with us again in September when she gets back from her basic training, and then she'll be doing her AIT, her advanced training in Fort Sam Houston. She's going to the Med Tech. So, with 3 of my 4 kids in the Army, kind of funny looking in the back of my wife's car. She's got, 3 stickers saying I'm the proud parent of a soldier. So
Speaking of Independence Day.
Speaking of Independence Day. Don't know if some people think, we're a little crazy with this, or they really, yeah, we do have 3 of our 4. Hey, maybe you got good comments like my daughter, who is, what can we say, erudite, bright, had a lot of fun. And you can send us comments at podcast@crossfeednews.com. And we'd love to hear your comments, and we'll share them on the air as well.
Yep. If you ever want to, send us a note, and you don't want it, just because you're shy or whatever, and don't want it played, or don't want us to read it, but you'd like to share some thoughts with us anyway, we'd be happy to listen to you. And just let us know you don't want it on the show. So, or feel free to go, and talk about, if I remember, you can just click on this if you're watching it in iTunes and go to the feedback page. But also, again, would encourage you to pop over to if you are using iTunes to watch this, stop by the iTunes store. If you just do a search on CrossFeed, it comes up, either the audio or the video, and post a review there. We'd love to have that. It lets people know that somebody's actually listening or watching. So then people are more likely to check it out if they see a bunch of reviews there. So, not to mention the fact that, we love getting feedback in any way, shape, or form. So, that's all I have. Stick around after this to get the, I'll try to remember to stick both the Katie Couric interview in there and the that Lost and Found video. So if you keep watching after we say goodbye, you can catch those, or you can at least listen to it if you're listening to the audio.
Okay, take care, everybody. Have a good holiday weekend, and we will see you next week.
Good night, everybody. God bless.
Lyle Love of John Mellencamp, it's really a kiss. St. Olaf, Henry Mildenberg, and Gustavus Adolphus. 89 and 1992's Miss America. Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, William Rehnquist, with Swearica. Bruce Willis, Lonnie Anderson, and David Hasselhoff. And William Hurt, and William H. Macy, and Chris Christopherson are Lutheran and on the late night TV screen. And Director could tell somebody, what does this mean? Steve Jobs of the Apple computer, and Gary Larson of the Far Side cartoon, and 3 different astronauts who flew shuttles toward the moon. Dave Winfield and NASCAR's Dales, Earnhardt and Jarrett, each had an acolyte gown and were happy to wear it. Tim Johnson, Fritz Hollings, Paul Simon, and Ed Meese all have been known to sing a little bit of This Is the Feast. You know who likes his potluck dinner? Troy Aikman, the Super Bowl winner. Governors of Indiana, Minnesota, Wyoming, Kansas, Idaho, Montana, and Tennessee, and Pocketville, with the cannon in D, and Woody from Cheers, and Cindy McTee. These all sing a little Lutheran liturgy. After Summer, Marty, and Lucas Cradock the Old, Albert Schweitzer, Soren Kierkegaard, and Dag Hammarskjöld, Sally Struthers and Margaret, and J.A.O. Preuss, Mary Hart, and Garrison Keeler, Lake Wobegon's Preuss, Liv Alma, Tom Landry, Professor Pelican, whose name is Yaroslav, Paul Gerhard, Mons and Meyer, and Starman, Norman Schwarzkopf, Robert Cave, the Gatorade maker, Johannes Kepler, and Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Martin Luther wasn't born a Lutheran, and that might be a shock, but Mark Hansen was, and April Larson, and Johann Sebastian Bach. And there are foods Lutherans adopt, for example, the pretzel. And Dana Carvey is a Lutheran now. Isn't that special? The most notable Lutherans of all are every single one of you.
Father Thomas Williams is a professor of theology at a Pontifical University in Rome and a CBS News analyst. And Reverend Floyd Flake is the pastor of the Greater Allen AME Cathedral in Queens, New York. Gentlemen, good to have you both. Tom, let me start with you if I can. This survey seems to have a lot of good news. People think prayer and faith is very important in their lives, and they don't think it's their way or the highway when it comes to salvation. But you think there might be a flip side to this. What is it?
Well, I think that organized religion could find this also a little bit threatening, in the sense that when dogma and doctrine become less and less important, then it doesn't really matter belonging to one church or to another. And religion has always been considered to be in the truth business. And when it's no longer about truth, but just about kind of feeling good, fitting in, then I think that that is threatening.
And may threaten their membership ranks.
Might threaten membership as well.
Meanwhile, Reverend Flake, do you think this means in some ways spirituality has become more important than religion in this country?
Well, I don't know that you can separate them exclusively. I think spirituality is a motivating force that drives people to a sense of trying to find themselves, trying to find their relationship to God. And so I don't think spirituality exclusively represents an entity that does not become a part of how we see God and where we find God. But I think it is an important piece of one's ability to have that indwelling spirit within them.
But it seems to transcend organized religion in many ways, according to some of these people, or at least they're more open to other faiths.
Well, I think that is new. I think that's a lot of what we call postmodernism, where people move toward that individualistic choice. But I don't think, and according to your survey, it is correct, that most people still believe in God.
You do believe that people still believe in God?
Oh, absolutely.
And Tom, are you surprised that 60% of those people believe that God is a personal force, but a quarter of them, 25% believe that he or she is an impersonal force?
Well, no, I'm not surprised. I think that kind of goes hand in hand with the rest of the study, in the sense that a personal God is a God that you pray to, that you have a relationship, and you believe that who listens to you and will answer you, whereas impersonal God is more about just empowering you to become your best self, but it's almost subordinate to you.
Well,
whereas,
it's a very interesting survey. Father Williams and Reverend Flake, gentlemen, thank you both so much.
Thank you.